Last time we looked at managing directories or folders from the command line. Today we're going to look at some commands to manage files. We're going to learn some more commands later on, but this is going to give us our basic introduction to file management here on the command line. Once again, I'm logged into Mercury, so to follow along with the video, please go ahead and log into the server and go ahead and start your script session for video 3. So the first thing we're going to look at is how do you create a new file in a Linux or Unix system. Oftentimes we want to, or occasionally, maybe not often, but occasionally we do want to create a file that doesn't have any content yet. So normally when we talk about files on a system, they're created by some application. If I have a text file, I usually have used a text editor to create it. A Word document would be created using Microsoft Word. But there's the concept of files that aren't really created by a particular application. We just want the file itself to exist, and that's what we're going to do here in this video for the first few files that we're going to use. And the command that we use to create a file that is just going to be a 0-byte file is touch. So if I just say touch file1, and now I show you the contents of this directory, in addition to the video script recording files, I also have this file1 that is there, along with the directories that we created last time. So you might have, again, a few other things in here as well, but the important thing to notice is that file1 now exists. And I can say touch file2 and file3 as well. And now if I do ls, I now have 3 files, file1, file2, and file3. I'm going to do ls space -l. So we looked at this in our first video to get a little bit more detail. You'll notice that the file1 is created in such a way that it's owned by Jeremy because I created it. Yours is going to be owned by your own username. So that first name that is there, where mine says Jeremy, is the owner of the file. This is a very important concept in Unix and Linux systems. We'll talk a lot more about file permissions in a future video, but for now it's good to know that that's the owner. Where it says faculty on mine is the group, so that's my default group. So when we use the touch command to create a file, it creates a file that is 0 bytes. The next column there shows the number of bytes. So a file that is 0 bytes that is created using the default owner and default group of the currently logged in user. The touch can also be used to update, say, the last edited time. So if you look at in my account here, video 2 was created on June 9th at 16:50, so at 4:50 in the afternoon. And it has a file size of 13,536 bytes. If I say touch video 2 and hit enter, and now I look at ls space -l, you notice that it updated the last edited time for video 2. It didn't change any of the other information about it. It didn't change the file size, it didn't change the permissions or the owner or anything like that. All it did is change the last edited date. So that's a way that you can basically say, hey, I've looked at a file recently, or the computer has looked at a file and I want to update the time to the current time for when it was last seen. But in our case, if you do touch with a file that hasn't existed before, like I did with file1, file2, and file3, the touch command causes a file to come into existence, which is handy when we need a few files for an exercise. I'm going to clear the screen here. And the first thing I'm going to do is move. I'm going to run ls again just so you can see what's in here. Now I'm going to move file1 into the dir1 directory. So I'm going to mv space file1. So mv, the command, space the source, so the file that I want to move, and then the destination. So I'm going to move it into the dir1 directory. So I type dir1 next. So mv space file1 space dir1. I hit enter. And now if I type ls, file1 is no longer in here. ls space dir1, file1 has been moved to a new destination. So last time we looked at the mv command being able to move directories. It can also move files. We also can use the mv command to rename files. So I'm going to read mv space file2 space second file. I'm just going to type out the word second and then type the word file. If I type ls, it still exists in the same location, but it is now named second file instead of file2. And then I can copy second file space dir1 / file2. So copy space second file space dir1 / file2. And actually that should be cp, I'm sorry. The Windows command line command is copy, and I sometimes have been working in Windows recently, and so I occasionally will flip which command I'm using. So when we type this, if I look now at ls of dir1, I have file 1 and file 2. If I look at ls here, I still have second file. So why did I use the dir1 / file 2? What I did there is I copied the file, second file, that was my input file, into the dir1 directory, and gave it a new name at the same time. So I said, when you copy it into that dir1 directory, give the name for the file file2. All of the contents of the file would be, if it had any contents, would be exactly the same. But this is a way that using the CP, this also works with MV, we can change the location of a file and the name of the file in a single step. So that's an important thing to know that we can do. We're going to do one more thing quickly here. We're going to say mv space star file star, and by star I mean the asterisk, it's shift 8 on your keyboard, space dir1. And now if I ls, both of the files are gone. If I look at the contents of dir1, I have file 1, file 2, file 3, and second file. The star is a really important concept. It's a character that means any number of characters, so it's a wildcard character. You'll oftentimes use this on the command line. So it's not at all uncommon to use wildcards to refer to a certain group of files. So here I'm saying move any file that has any number of characters, the word file, and then any number of characters in the file name. So it's basically anything that has the word file in the file name, move into the dir1 directory. And that's exactly what happened. So moving, copying, renaming files, all pretty normal, common operations. But we occasionally do need to actually work with the contents of files on the command line. We're going to look at using a text editor in a future lecture in more detail, but we can use a handful of commands that will give us information about a file, even without using a text editor. So go ahead and clear the screen. And cp space /home /public /go.txt space dot. So before we execute this command, I'm going to tell you what it's going to do. So cp, as you know, copies a file. There's a file that's in the folder /home /public /go.txt. It's a file that I created and put there so that you would be able to copy it. And then dot is a shorthand way of saying the current directory. So this says my source is in /home /public /go.txt, a absolute path to a file, and my destination is the current directory. So when I type this, hit enter, and I type ls, I now have a file called go.txt here in my home directory. And you should have a file called go.txt in yours as well. The first thing we're going to look at is looking at the contents of a text file. In Unix or Linux systems, the file extension is not required, but it is still often there. So we're going to use the cat command, which is short for concatenate, which just means to attach something to something else. Cat space go.txt. This is going to concatenate the contents of go.txt to the screen, to the terminal, so that we can see it. In other words, it's just going to print the contents to the screen. The cat command is designed to work with text files. Go.txt, you can tell from that extension, is a text file. But again, a lot of times you'll have files that are text files or made up of plain text of some sort in a Unix system that are not, that don't in fact have that .txt extension. So this is a command that you can use to check out the contents of a file as long as it contains plain text. It doesn't matter what the actual file extension is. So cat space go.txt. When I hit enter to run this command, it's going to print a whole bunch of stuff to the screen. This is from a text is from a web page called senseis.xmp.net. It is just about the game of Go. It's one of my hobbies, so I copied some text here and put it in so that you could use this for our exercise today. So if I want to look at the contents of a text file, the cat prints that out to the screen. That went by really fast, and sometimes I want to look at things one page at a time instead of looking at it all at once. That's where the more command comes in. So more space go.txt is going to look at things, and it's going to do it one page at a time. If I hit the space bar, it'll go down an entire page. I can use the enter key to go down one line at a time instead of one page at a time. And then if I just want to quit, I can press the Q key. So that will quit the more program for me. So once again, cat shows all the contents. It's going to scroll everything on to the screen all at once. More will look at the contents and let me look at it page by page. Occasionally, especially when you're working with log files and other sort of procedurally generated files, we're interested in the information at either the beginning or the end of the file. And to see the information at the beginning of a file in Unix or Linux, the command is head. So I want to look at the head of the file. Head space go.txt shows me the first 10 lines of the file by default. If I look at the man page for head, you can see that I can look at the -n option to see a certain number of lines instead of seeing the first 10. So if I just wanted to see the first 2 lines, I could do head space -2 go.txt. That's going to show me just the first 2 lines of the file. Or head -n2 go.txt. So there's just a couple different ways we can write it. And the man page actually shows both of those ways. So head -n2 shows me the first 2 lines of the file. Tails are very similar, so if I do tail space go.txt, it's going to show me the last 10 lines of the file by default. And I can do the same thing in tail. I could say tail -n20 go.txt to see just the last 20 lines of the file. Head and tail and cat are all ways of printing things out to the screen. It just depends on what you want to see. And more as well. Cat shows you the whole file all at once. More shows it to you page by page. Head shows it to you a certain number of lines at the beginning, and tail shows a certain number of lines at the end. So this should give you some basics for file management on a Unix or Linux system, and we'll go into some more depth issues in a future video.